Hi, Lynn Loudermilk here, the practicing crafter, and we are making paper today. But today's theme is actually making paper using additives from nature. So we are going to get together some paper that was in my recycling bin, and I'm going to show you 10 different additives from a nature hike that I took yesterday afternoon. Of course, it is fall, so leaves would be in that. There's going to be some pine cone paper. We are going to make some paper with red Georgia clay mud and some different things. So stick around and let's see how all these papers turn out. In case you have never made paper before, I do want to just go through making your own paper is so much fun. There are so many things that you can do to get creative when you're making paper. So you can, take different colors of recycled paper. Maybe I want to make an orange or a yellow paper. Then I can gather all these things that have those colors and make something new. Take something that was used, no longer needed, and we're going to make it into something new again. I love to use recycled papers. I don't make a lot of it. I make small batches, and that's primarily because I do use it in other paper crafts. So instead of going to the store and purchasing all of my paper, a lot of times I will just use a handmade paper. And I did used to buy it. I mean, you can buy handmade paper from different people that make it, but it's so easy to do at home. There is absolutely no reason, if you're a crafter, that you shouldn't at least try this. You might get hooked. That's all I have to say. You might get hooked. So right now, for this purpose, I am going through and I'm grabbing my lighter colored papers because I want all of these additives to show up well. I have a huge box of this stuff, but just to show you what I'm doing. So that has a little bit of dark on it. I'm just going to rip that little bit of dark off there. And I'll take the rest of this white. I'm just going to tear it into teeny tiny pieces. I'm even using paper towels. These are just like paper towels where we used them probably for some little something. And I just grabbed them and put them in my stash. But as soon as I get finished doing this, I'm going to take this cup and I'm going to completely cover my paper with water. Then, once it's covered with water, I'm going to set it to the side, and I am just going to let that paper soak in that water for probably 3 or 4 hours, just while I'm doing other things. And then we will jump into the fun part of actually making our paper and adding in all these fun things that I picked up on that walk yesterday. So stick around. All right, so this is the paper, the one that's basically whites and off-whites. There may be something like that that's in there that maybe I missed. This was not intended to be in there. Let's just go ahead and pull that out, actually. And this has been soaking overnight, so I started soaking that last night. And I'm going to swizz it in my blender until it becomes a nice, fine, pulpy texture. I may have to add a little extra water back to it in order to get it to where I need it, but I will show you what it looks like when we get finished.
Okay, so let's just take a look at the consistency that we have here. And as you can see, it is just very smooth, just a very smooth consistency. There's no pieces of paper actually left.
And we are going to start by making our first nature paper. I'm not sure which one of these this is going to be. I am just pouring in my pulp, and since I'm using a mixer, I am going to pour my water into that mixer just to get the rest of that pulp. Help me rinse out my blender. Let me rinse my blender. Now, there is not a lot in here because I'm only making a few sheets of each of these papers. And the reason I'm only making a few sheets of each one is because I'm just experimenting with a few things to make a few different papers to use in my crafts. So the first one that I'm going to experiment with is this pine that I did find. And all I did was remove each of these little sections. So I just broke that leaf down to get smaller pieces to use for this project. So I think I have plenty. I don't need a lot. I think it's always fun to take a minute when you're doing something to experiment and play and really figure out the direction that you want different things to go. So we're just going to mix in that pine. If you happen to know what kind of pine that is, I would love to know. The only thing I know is the only time I really ever see it is when people are trying to put up a barrier so they don't see their neighbors. The only time I ever see that tree. I don't even know if it is native to Western North Carolina and Georgia. So we're just mixing that up. We want enough water in our pan that we can slide our decal through or our screen through to pick up the pulp to create the paper. So this is actually a roasting pan that I use. This is what works for me, okay? So I'm going to slide my netting in from one side to the other and then just try to get an even coat of that pulp as I am doing that. See, we can get these in different places. All right, so we're just going to slide this in. All right, and then I'm going to pick that up. Now that did not come out in a great spot. Here's some on the edge. So I'm just going to add those in for the moment, and hopefully they will get pressed in enough. Now before I attempt to remove this, I actually go in from the bottom. I take my sponge and I go in from the bottom of whatever I'm using, and I just rub it over that to get some of that initial water out of there, because the next steps are very important that we get the paper dry, and that is so that it will easily release from whatever type of frame you have your paper in. You're just going to turn this over, and it stays in place. It's not like it's just falling off the frame that you're using, the decal or the splatter pan or whatever you happen to be using. And I am just going to work that water away from that. And you can get used to doing this. You will be able to tell when your pulp is separating from your decal and mold or from your frame. So if this is starting to, this sheet is actually quite thin, and that is because, again, I'm not working with a lot. I am a lot of pulp. I'm just working with very little pulp just to see how these papers turn out. If that's ready to come off yet. It's not. I can help this one along a little bit. It's not going to be the best one, but let's see. Okay, I kind of tore that one, but part of it's because it is so thin. I've got it so thin. So I am going to take another rag and I am just going to roll this over, and that's just to make sure everything just gets flattened out really well, and it helps absorb some of that water into these cloths. All right, let's do another one. All right, now before I do another one, I am going to once again mix everything, get everything moving around a little bit so that nothing is settled on the bottom of this pan. And we are going to do the same thing once again. So we're going to put in the mold, slide it over, and then lift. Okay, take my sponge, open that off a little bit. Now, one thing that did happen is I did not end up with any of these on this side. So I'm actually just going to place a few on here, and some of those will end up adhering, and probably a few of those may even fall off, but that's okay because most of them will be fine. That sponge to the side, and I'm just going to take my mold, turn it over, and we're going to finish getting that water off of that mold. This is the same process that we are going to follow for every single one of these. So for the rest of the video, what I will do for the other 9 elements that we are going to mix in, we will just do a quick view of the mix in and maybe removing one of them from the mold, and then I will remove all of the rest separately, and we will take a look at where we are at before they dry and after they dry. How does that sound? Now, if you enjoy making paper, I'd love to see in the comments some of the things that you have experimented with, maybe some of your favorite papers to make. So many times, crafters are the ultimate recyclers, upcyclers. I'm the worst for not throwing anything away. So every time there's a box that's empty or paper stored almost to the point of being ridiculous, and I have to go through and actually send some things to the recycling center. But that's okay. A lot of this stuff just gets reused. Like this paper, it can be perfectly good paper. It just had something on it we didn't like, or we weren't using it anymore, whatever the case may be. And now we are able to take that and make it into something new. I think with the way that I measured my paper out for these projects, I'm going to be able to get about 4 sheets from each one. And that was probably a cup and a half of paper before I added the water. So if you're trying to figure out how much paper you can make with a certain mixture, then that's kind of where I am at. Now, that being said, it also depends on how thick or thin you make your paper. So I have made this paper pretty thin, and the thinner, or at least my experience, the thinner you make the paper, the harder it is to remove from whatever mold you are using. So just keep that in mind. Thicker paper, for me anyway, is easier to remove from a mold than thinner paper. This is going to be the last piece we are going to make using this pine. Just in case I haven't already said it, I'm using whites and neutral colors so that I can see what the elements look like that we are putting into this paper. All right, additive number 2. So for this one, we are going to do pine cones. And why you can't use big, beautiful pine cones that sometimes we decorate with, if you are taking a walk and you find some of these little guys, you can use those to try to do a mix in for your paper. So I have already taken one apart, and I'm just going to take one apart for you really quick. Couple of things, they are sticky. They're pine cones, they're going to be sticky, right? But the other thing is they smell amazing. And all I'm doing right here, I'm not going to put the new in there. These actually have dried overnight, so they're not so sticky. But I am just going to remove each of these little, I don't know what they're called. Do you know what they're called? Off this pine cone. I'm just going to peel this pine cone apart. I don't know what else to call it. And we will let these dry, and then we are going to use those, make some paper. Now, as I'm peeling these apart, you can see that these are green. I hope you can tell that. Can you tell how green those are? So I do not know how that will react over time. I can tell you that the set that I peeled yesterday that has had a little time to dry, they are still vibrant. They are still a very bright green. So if you take a look at those, you can see, let's see, it's still a very green color. So I don't know. I guess we would see over time what that might do. But this is basically how I am able to add a pine cone to paper. So I'm going to stop doing this and move this to the side. We're going to bring over our next set of pulp that we have prepared. Let me zoom back out because we need to, there we go. Is that better? Can you see that pretty good? Let's just scoot that over there. I think that's pretty good. So I am just going to add these pine cones in these little pine nibs or whatever they are into this paper. My hands are already sticky. Let's just mix this. Mix, and see if we can get some of these sweet little pine nibs into our paper that we're getting ready to create. I do not have a lot mixed in there right now, but if I like it, I will end up doing the rest of those. And I'm going to add in a couple more down here at the bottom where, come off my finger. I'm just going to add more down here because I have quite a few up here at the top, but that did not carry through to just leave that one. All right. Let's just get one more right here. Here, how's that? All right, well, I'm going to put one more. These are so tiny. I don't know. Let's see. I'm kind of excited to see what happens with this. I think it's just seems very fallish to me to using the pine cones for that. I'm going to clean off my mold right here. There we go. All right. Now let's just see if we can some of that water off there. You may be able to tell that this paper is appearing to be just a little thicker than the paper that I did a few minutes ago. And let me just adjust you a little bit. Make sure my camera doesn't fall into the water. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? Oh, goodness. So we have taken some of that dampness off of there. Let's move this guy over. And we've got our paper towel. And let's do this. Again, I'm just going to show this one here. And at the end, after they all dry, we will take a look at all of these more closely. And this is a little thicker than what I did before. And so if my experience holds true, it is actually going to lift a little easier than the thinner paper. So you can see where that is lifting up. There you go. You just spread this back out, make sure it's nice and flat, and roll that out. And just not to bore you with pressing out probably 4 more sheets of this, I will pause this and we will start with number 3 here in a moment. Okay, number 3. So I picked this up outside and it was just a piece of bark that was on the ground. It has got so many different layers on here. I think bark and trees are such an interesting something to use. And one of my favorite projects I have done with bark is actually creating a planter from a nursery pot. So I will try to remember to include that link in the description. If that is of interest to you, be sure and check the description for that project. It is actually one of my favorite projects I've ever done. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work out because this bark is rather thick. Something more like a river birch that has really thin bark may actually work better, but that's not what I found. Let's bring our tray back over that has some of our pulp still in there. And let's just mix this one in. Okay, let's get the rest of that. There we go. And take our mold, make sure everything's floating around like it should. I didn't really catch much of that bark, did I? So we are going to, once again, just strategically place some of these. Some of them will stay put and some of them won't. So that's fine. I think that this bark, we'll wait and see, but I think maybe it would have looked better on like a brown, maybe a brown paper. Stamp that off. This paper is still pretty thick. This one came out a little thicker, so it should be pretty easy to get out of this mold. Not quite. Let's see if it'll come up from any of these edges. Nope. Thought it was going to come up easier than this. Oh, sometimes it just takes a little patience. You know, this could be a fun paper to make if you live in an area that, you know, has some of those extremely admired trees that have beautiful bark. If it works out, it may not work out. This is just not wanting to let go. Oh my goodness. Let's keep going. And one thing that I've found, people love handmade paper. It adds such a special touch. You know, the texture is different. It's just not something you see every day. And there are so many people that just appreciate paper. So, you know, if you are looking for an idea to do to get into a craft, I think this one is a great one. You don't want to try to pull that away from the mold because it is so delicate that more than likely what you're going to do is you're going to rip it. So just keep that in mind. It's trying to let loose, about to let loose. There we go. And that was the first sheet. I'm going to continue to make a few more of these. And then we will move to our fourth additive. I started recording this and did not turn on my microphone. So let me show you an example of what we are using. I also picked up some maple leaves in yellows and pinks and some colors that were almost more orangey, and just broke those up to add to this water. Very hopeful about this one. I like what I'm seeing in the water, and I'm very, I don't know, this one is kind of exciting me a little bit as far as the look that we may end up getting from this one. I didn't get enough pulp right there in the corner. Let's see. Once you do that, it's hard to get that refilled. Let's just clean off our mold a little bit. Let's get a little of that water off the back here. I want to add a few more onto that. I may actually just add, let me just grab a few little pieces out of here to add onto this. Just some little empty pockets. Oops, I just messed up my paper. You have to be so easy when you're doing this. It just doesn't want to come off my fingers, the problem. There we go. I'm going to have a little ripped spot in this one, but that's, for what I am using it for, that is fine. If you were using it and you needed a full sheet of paper, that is probably not going to work for you. You would probably have to put your pulp back in the water and redo it one more time. Maple leaves are one of my favorites. Poplar leaves. Normally, our poplar leaves are absolutely just brilliant yellow. Because of our dry weather after Hurricane Helene, I think we've had 20 some odd days. There's still a lot of color out there, but it's not as vibrant. It's not as vibrant as it normally is, which is sad. But, you know, every year is a little bit different, right? So next year will be better, probably, and everybody will be excited to have a better fall season. I'm going to bring in another sponge that's still very dry. See if we can use that to help us get this. This sheet turned out a little thin. It's wanting to let go. It's just not quite there yet. All right, let's try again. Come on. I'm just going to use my finger to rub it along the edges and see if that helps release this sheet a little bit. There we go. Come on. Well, not perfect, but for my purposes, it is fine. We'll just put this other back in the mix, if you will. All right, let's try to pat that out so that it's nice and flat. So I'm going to keep doing these, and then we will go to number 5. So I got so excited about the maple leaves
that I quite a few more than just a couple for this experiment. So I have now ran out of towels to work with. And I just wanted to let you know, in case you have not made paper before, what I'm going to do is I am going to find a place that's got plenty of room to lay out all these sheets of paper where they can be undisturbed until they dry. Now that could be a place in your house, you know, a countertop, a table, wherever you can just have plenty of room to spread these out while they dry. For me, that area is outside on I have a covered porch. So I am going to take these outside and lay them to dry. Now, sometimes outside is a good idea, sometimes it's not such a good idea, but today it is supposed to be in the 80s with low humidity, so it will be a great day to lay these out to dry, and I imagine that they will dry rather quickly. If you are laying these out to dry in your house, it may take longer. So, you know, depending on your environment and where you're at, you might start checking those at about 4 hours. It could also depend on the thickness of the paper that you've made. You just have to take into account several things. But the way that you can really tell, you'll be able to tell the dry spots on your paper as it continues to dry. And you just want to make sure it is dry before you stack your sheets of paper on top of each other.
The next one we are going to work with is poplar. So this is a poplar leaf. And again, it should have been yellow. But we just don't have that kind of color. But I do think that this is a beautiful, beautiful shades of a little bit of yellow, and brown, and red that you can still see in there. So it should still be very pretty, I think. So let's just tear off. I'm just crumbling that up a bit. I don't want to disintegrate it, but I do want it in small pieces. Let's bring our water back over that we're working with. I am about to run out of white pulp, so I'm going to have to really, oops, it just went everywhere. That's why I should have poured the pulp in first. Let's straighten you out a little bit because you are not very straight. We are just going to add in just a few, just because I'm just trying to do a couple. And there we go. Be a little big. This one might be a little big. Just break it down just a little bit more. Let's try doing one, and then we will get into a second one. Oops, I want to do it this way. Must not have gotten all that maple leaf out of there. You can see that there's a yellow one, and that is not the poplar. That is from the maple leaves that I was doing, and I had thought I had completely cleaned out my water, and I didn't. There we go. So there is our first poplar, and I'm going to do one more, and then we will get started with our next paper. Okay, so we've added our oak leaf in. It is a very neutral brown, maybe with like just a hint of yellow. So let's just see what we can do with that one. Whoops, I didn't do very good. Let me start over. Okay, let's mix this together again. There we go. Make sure our pulp is all up. And now let's just go in the side, out the other side. I just move it around a little to disperse my leaves. Just add a couple more and some empty spots here. And yeah, there we go. Dry it back a little bit. Okay, see what we get with the oak. I think it's looking pretty good. So let's move to, I think our next one will be, I don't lost count of where we're at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're on number 7. So for 7, we are going to use some pine needles that we gathered to add into our paper. I've got some that are a little more green, and I've got some that are brown. So I'm just going to take these, and we are going to see how that works out. So let's see how much pulp we still have in here. We have a little bit. Let's see if we can make a couple more since I'm running low using what we've got here. And in we go. Here we go. Catch as many of those as we can. Oh well, it'll be fine once we get it rolled out. Just add a couple more in here. Just some little empty spots. Maybe one over here in the corner. All right, so what we're looking like right now. This is one of the messier ones that I am going to try, and basically it is taking red Georgia clay, and we are just going to see, what kind of effect we get with adding that into our mixture. I'm actually doing this with white paper, or white pulp, excuse me, white pulp, and get just a little bit more, because whenever you're working with paper, it's going to dry a lot lighter than what it looks like when it's wet. So I want to have a nice, good red color for this paper. Now this could be a huge mistake, but we're going to try it anyway. I'm probably going to stain anything I touch at this point. But let's see what happens. We'll be really excited. You see where people do this with t-shirts and different articles of clothing. It will be interesting to see how the texture of this paper as well as the color actually comes out. So I'm just going to do a couple of sheets of this, or at least I'm going to try to. All right, so we'll see what that one turns out like. Next.
Okay, so this next additive is going to be from a rotting tree that was close by, and I just pulled some of the wood from the inside of the tree, and it's very soft. It comes apart very easily. It would probably be great to actually soak it as well and incorporate it in to the structure of the paper, which I may do at a later date. We'll see. So let's see how this one turns out.
Our last one is actually going to be, these were little flowers and they've turned to seeds. So they're like little bitty puff balls. You can see right there, just little, almost like your dandelion seeds. So we are going to add those in here. Let's just going to add the rest of these, because after this I am finished with this little project. We're going to see, I don't even know if these are going to show up, but when it is all said and done, we'll see how it looks. Now let's make a few of these. Okay. Can't really see it right now, but I'm hoping that once this pulp dries, that we will be able to see those seeds in there. So we'll see how that works out. You know, I'd love to hear about any unusual things that you've mixed in with your paper. I'm going to finish up this pan and we're going to take a look at all of those papers. All right, so are we ready for some final results? Let's take a look and see what we have. These are not in the order that I recorded the video, but they are in order of the way that I actually organized them. Let's get started with this paper. Now these are from the maple leaves. I like some of them better than others. I really like the ones that seem to have more yellow in them. I guess just because it stands out a little bit more. These are the oak leaves that I used, and they actually turned out a lot prettier than I thought that they were going to. They have a lot more red in them than I anticipated, so I wish I had made a few more of those, but I didn't, so that's okay. We'll make more later. These next couple of sheets are from the poplar trees. These that are more yellowish actually came from the poplars. Kind of a mustard yellow, aren't they? And we have these. And these are the little nibs from those tiny little pine cones that I pulled apart. Somebody on my Instagram posted about me making, because I had mentioned that I was going to do some pine cone paper, and it gave me another idea that I would like to dry out some pine cones and try to incorporate those into the structure of the paper a little bit more. So I might try that later. And then these are from some other pines. You know, those pines that everybody plants because they don't want to see their neighbors. I really like those. I like that texture that comes through. I don't know if you can see that, but it's got this neat little texture. I think that it really adds something fun to those pieces of paper. Let's keep going. These are just pine needles. So I just broke up some pine needles and added them in. And they are not staying incorporated too well, actually. Some of them are coming out a little easier. See, like that. That one just came off. Some of them are staying put. But, yeah, and that's probably not my favorite. Not one of my favorites, the pine needles. This is, and you can barely see these, but this is from, I picked some wildflowers, and they already had made their seeds. And so that was the seeds from those little wildflowers. And it's okay. I think it would have been better if it was a different color paper and they stood out a little bit more because, you know, this is just really rather boring, isn't it? Just boring. So, but it's still, you know, very useful. So I will still use it. Absolutely. Now this one actually came out better than I thought it was going to. And this is from bark. So these are just little bark pieces. And I anticipated that they were going to be more like the pine and they weren't going to stay together all that well. But these are doing really well. I actually like the way that those came out. Again, another one with the bark and the bark. And then this one, I actually had a tree that has been decomposing in the yard, and the inside, the wood on the inside is very, very soft. So I pulled that to use in this, and I really like this one. I really like the texture, how that one came out. Yeah, so I think that that one's pretty interesting. I wish it was on white paper because I do think that it would have shown up better, but that's okay. We'll make use of it. There's another one of those. And then this one is one of my favorites. This one has a very odd consistency. It is the one that I made with the mud. And as you can see, there were lots of minerals, lots of mica, and those types of things. And I do not know if that if this will even pick up how this shimmers, but this is so shimmery and it feels so different than the other papers. But I really love the way this one came out. I think that one is really cool. And so I just made a couple of those. I didn't know really what I was getting into, so it was just a test. Yep. And then these last ones, all I did was I just took everything I had left and mixed it all together. And these have the pine needles, the pine leaves, and a few more of the little nibs from the pine cones. I would love to hear which one of these was your favorite. If you liked any of them, if you hate them all, that's fine too. You can let me know that. That brings us to the end of another video. So, if you decide to get out there and make some paper, if you've never made paper, number one, I encourage you to do it if you're a crafter, because it is just so much fun to make your own paper. And there are so many things that you can mix in. You can make any color you would like. And it's a great way to recycle your paper. And it's also a great way to incorporate paper that you have made into your other projects. With that, I hope you get out there, create something fun, make it yours, and have a wonderful day. Bye.